Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Loft. Now this week, as I mentioned last week, is not going to be a very fun video. I certainly, I definitely want to make it, but I also don't want to make it. In fact, I've honestly put off making it. We are going to touch on some very sensitive topics. I already put a disclaimer at the front of the video, but I just want to reiterate that and verbally give you some trigger warnings. We will be talking about thoughts and attempts at suicide, depression, and extreme cases of emotional abuse and bullying. So it's not going to be easy for me. I don't expect it to be easy for you to watch or listen to. However you take in these, more serious videos of mine, and if at all you feel I just need to skip this one, you are more than welcome to. I don't expect this one to get a high view count, but I just want to put it out there that we are going to be talking about some heavy topics, and they need to be talked about. As I said last week, they need to be talked about. They need to be discussed. I am sure there is someone in my audience that has known or has dealt with these issues, or has known someone that has dealt with these issues. And once again, I am putting a text disclaimer at the front of this. But if you or anyone you know is dealing with seriously contemplating suicide or even attempting suicide, please get help. Please seek that out. I will link the suicide hotline in the video description. Talk to a minister, a priest, a counselor, a trusted loved one, an objective third party, whoever you need to talk to. Please get help. If you are feeling that you are at that point, you need to know that there are people who love and care about you and want to help you get through that. So once again, if you are dealing with any of that, please seek help. Feel free to call the hotline that I'm leaving in the video description. No one should feel like that is their best option. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get into it. So like I've said, today's topic is not going to be all that much fun. We are going to be touching on some heavy topics. I'm going to give you this other disclaimer that I'm doing this somewhat unscripted, simply because, I want the raw emotion to be there. I may do some editing and cutting for time, but by and large, what you're hearing is just me. I was diagnosed with dyspraxia and subsequently placed on the autism spectrum when I was 5. For most of my childhood, I was blissfully unaware of that, not to mention what that even meant. I was blissfully unaware. Started school and started noticing, I didn't quite fit in. And became somewhat of a target occasionally. Not often, though. Changed schools in 3rd grade. And about 2nd, 3rd, 4th is when I can remember starting to have autistic meltdowns. I have several stories from around that time. One of which I didn't even, I couldn't calm down even in going to sleep. I sobbed and hyperventilated myself to sleep. I thought I was having a nervous breakdown. And all of these are, if you want to hear these stories, I'm more than happy to touch on them at some point. But for the sake of time and getting to what I really want to talk about, it just helps to have that background. I remember having meltdowns starting around that point, at least in public, which for people who don't know that you're on the spectrum back then, that wasn't a known thing. For most people, when they thought autism, again, I've talked about this in prior videos. When most people thought autism, they thought Rain Man, or the stereotype of the nonverbal kid who rocks back and forth and only makes guttural sounds. They didn't think someone, including me, I didn't think this, someone who functioned somewhat normally just may seem a little more sensitive. And we're more sensitive because we have trouble reading social norms. So, yeah. Most of my early school years were okay. Not just amazing, but they were fine. It's also when I began struggling in math. Was fourth grade. And some of the issues that would come up in my school life later started popping up in fourth grade, third, fourth, fifth grade. Mostly fourth grade is when a lot of that started popping up. Like not handling time management well, getting homework and projects done not on time, things like that. So, all of that you kind of need to know for going into my 7th grade year. This is where things really kind of took a head. 7th grade comes, and I get overwhelmed fairly early on in the school year. Like maybe a month and a half, 2 months in, I'm already overwhelmed. But because I've always been the smart one, and the good at school one, I didn't say anything. I didn't express how overwhelmed I felt. I wish I had, but I didn't. So assignments start going undone and or unturned in. Oftentimes they were math assignments that were in that were loose paper, and I'd put them in my backpack, and over the course of the day they would get all crumpled. Or if I didn't have math that day but had it ready, it would stay in my backpack. And by the time it was time to turn it in, it would be all crumpled and at the bottom of the backpack, and I wouldn't be able to find it until 2 weeks after the fact. And by that point, it's so crumpled and destroyed that it's not worth turning in. And I didn't have the ability to get organized on my own. I just was extremely overwhelmed. I had a locker that I never used because I could never remember the combination. I would lug all of my books around with me. And there were days where I accidentally left the wrong book at home. This is not an easy year to try to remember for me. There's a reason I haven't remembered most of it. Some of it's been by choice, and some of it's been my own subconscious protecting me, but here we are. So, yeah, I struggled with that. And there were nights where I would go to bed late with homework still left to do, and I would wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to finish it. And I'm sure everyone's done that at some point, but that happened to me a lot. Because like I said, timing was not a net positive for me. So it kind of came to a head. My teachers wanted a conference with my parents, because it wasn't just one class that I was struggling with, it was almost all of them. I was in Honors English, and I was flunking out of Honors English. So my teachers met with my parents, and they were kind of blindsided by this. They had no clue. Won't be the last time that happens. But yeah, they were kind of blindsided by just how much it was. But my math teacher at the time, she was not a good teacher. She was not a nice lady. She would, a couple of years later, be fired for being dishonest about her students, and to her students. So she just was not a good person. And even if that wasn't the case, I shouldn't have had her as a teacher. So from her mindset, she asked my parents, thinking that it's their fault that I'm falling behind. Well, have you checked his assignment notebook? Yes. Have you made sure that he's doing the assignments? Yes. They watched me do my homework. They've seen me struggle to do it. They've seen it, so they know that I'm doing it. Have you checked the parent-teacher hotline? Yes. Then I don't understand what the problem is. She didn't have the framework nor the willingness to experience anything outside of her bubble. So we have that my parents have that conference, and they're realizing, oh, there's a struggle here. There's a problem here. Well, they doubled down on watching me, making sure I get everything, and I'm still overwhelmed. I still feel extremely overwhelmed, to the point where, and here's where we get to the reason for the disclaimers and the trigger warnings. Keep in mind, I'm 13. No one, especially not a 13-year-old, should feel this way. I was so overwhelmed and was at the point where I felt like suicide was an option. So one Sunday night, I took out a piece of paper and wrote a note planning my own funeral. And yeah. I also, that same night, I tried using a belt around my neck. I realized that I wouldn't be able to hang myself, but I figured if I got the belt tight enough, that I'd be able to do it. That didn't work. I tried a duffel bag over the head and zipped the zipper up to my neck. I did nearly pass out that way, but my instinct to live kicked in, and I, of course, unzipped and ripped the bag off. I tried that more than once that night, thinking that I could muster up the courage to actually do it. Thankfully, I never did. Finally, I gave up trying and went to bed. I put the note in my desk drawer and essentially put it out of my mind. Wednesday comes, and my mom is cleaning and organizing a little bit. She's straightening up my room, and she comes across the note. You can understand her reaction was not like, oh, this is interesting. No, understandably, she was emotional about it. She immediately called her boss, who was the youth minister at her church. And by the way, the school that I went to was offered by my church. It was part of my church. You didn't have to go to church there to go to school there, but it helped. So she calls her boss, the youth minister, and he and I were close because she's his secretary, so I've hung out with him. His youngest daughter is my classmate. So, you know, and he was a Trekkie, and I'm a Trekkie, so we connected on that. So she talks to him about it, and I'm completely unaware of all of this. I go through my normal Wednesday, and as I'm about to go to PE, you know, I've dressed for it, I think. I had changed clothes and gotten dressed for PE. Someone comes and says, you know, tells me that the youth minister wants to see me. I'm thinking, oh, great, he wants to hang out, you know, and he's getting me out of PE. This is fantastic. I hated PE. You know, not even thinking, oh, did mom find the note? I didn't even think of the note. So I'm like, oh, great, this is awesome. So I go to his office. I walk in the door, and first thing he says to me is, so your mom found a note, and she shared it with me. And I immediately remembered about the note and wished that I had thrown it away. I was more upset with myself that I hadn't hidden it better than I was relieved that someone had found it and I was going to get help, you know, and that it was going to be talked about. So he and I talk. I don't remember exactly everything that went on. He suggested doing a prayer journal and journaling just in general, which I guess ultimately that's what this channel kind of is. But that night at Wednesday night church, you know, I go to choir, and then my parents are having a Sunday school teachers meeting. So I go to where they're having the meeting, and my mom sees me and comes out. We hug. She's in tears. I feel terrible for having caused that type of concern for her. And so, yeah, that year I got tested again. Dyspraxia became part of my vocabulary. I didn't fully understand what that meant at that point, but it was a part of my vocabulary, a part of, you know, that was the first time I remember hearing the word. And I still struggled that year. There were days, and I don't think I've told my family this, but there were days where my bedroom was on the second floor, and it overlooked the front porch, which really was just a concrete slab. And there were days where I kind of looked out and was like, you know, I could sit on the ledge and just fall off and it'd be over. In fact, there were days where I sat on the ledge thinking just that. I had taken the screen out and sat on the ledge. And again, I don't think I've shared that with my family, so this is the first time they're hearing it. And if that is the case, I wish I had told y'all sooner. But yeah, that year I struggled. And my parents got me help. They got me an organizational therapist, an actual, you know, counselor therapist as well. We did more testing with the doctor that had originally diagnosed me, and all of that. But one thing about me that created a situation where all of this ended up not being necessarily the most helpful or as helpful as it could have been was I had a tendency to tell people what they wanted to hear. Same goes for my counselors. how good can counseling actually be if all I'm saying is what the counselor wants to hear? My parents fought hard for me. In fact, I talked to my dad this past weekend, and he mentions having regret and guilt for how little he did my 7th grade year. And honestly, Dad, I know you're watching this. I don't know where that guilt comes from. To me, you did more than what I would have expected of you. As from where I'm sitting, you fought tooth and nail and did everything you could, short of coming in and beating the snot out of the kids that I'm about to talk about. Which that would not have been helpful. Would have felt good, I'm sure, but it wouldn't have been helpful. But yeah, I know this won't assuage your sense of guilt, but from my perspective, you and Mom really should not feel any guilt about that year. You did absolutely above and beyond, and you did amazing things to help me, given the resources, given how much we knew, and how much you knew based on what I was telling you, an incomplete picture. You did absolutely everything that I would expect of a parent. So I don't want you to feel any guilt about how you handled that year. Again, I know that won't necessarily assuage it, but I hope that helps. My parents were able to get me out of having to go to PE, and they got me into a study hall. At this school, it was kindergarten through 12th grade. So there was an elementary school, junior high, and a high school, all in one thing. And the junior high and high school co-mingled. They didn't necessarily have classes together, but they co-mingled. And one place where they co-mingled was study halls. And there were a couple of seniors in my study hall who were they made it their mission to legitimately torment me, emotionally and verbally. I was their target. And to the point of, making comments about my sexuality and questioning it. And yeah, there were days I did not want to go to school during 7th grade. I've blocked a lot of that year out. Yeah, they targeted me. I don't know why. I know I wasn't, the nicest person in 7th grade, but who is? I was a little bit of a jerk. But again, who isn't in 7th grade? I was stuck up, I'll admit it. Relied too much on my smarts. But still, what they did went beyond taking me down a peg. And looking back, obviously my projected ego was compensating for deep-seated pain and feelings of being overwhelmed and out of control for the first time in my life, really. About the only about the only things about that year that I like talking about. That was the year that I met the woman who would later become Mrs. Woody. She was absolutely a bright spot of that year. And is a bright spot to this day in my life. She and I were in the same group of friends that year, and it was her first year at that school. It was my last year at that school. But, we weren't close friends, but we were friends. And that year I needed someone like her in my life. And I thank God every day that I have her. So that's one really big bright spot. And then, of course, a spring break trip that I did because I actually, it was a reward that my mom did. We went to Los Angeles and Las Vegas. The Star Trek experience at the Las Vegas Hilton. That's how long ago this was. But I had stayed on top of my assignments and gotten everything turned in and brought my grades up to a certain point. We would go. I did, and we did. So, yay. But a lot of that year, I have blocked out. And I wish that I had processed it a lot earlier than I have, because now I'm doing a video and there are a lot of really long pregnant pauses in this narration that I'm going to leave in. Because I think it helps to hear the emotional processing. And I'm putting it out there because I want people to know that there are real struggles. And if you're like me, say you're in ASPE or some other comorbidity and or have an autism spectrum disorder, but you're able to function in society to the point where you tell people that you're autistic and they look at you and go, really? You don't look autistic, or you look normal, you seem normal, all of which I understand why people say those things. I still hate the fact that they say that. But yeah, if you've struggled with any of this, I want you to know you're not alone, and that's part of why I'm putting myself out there like this. I am extremely thankful that the stigma that used to be associated with autism is starting to ebb away. And there are a lot more resources for people. So hopefully you won't have to be, future generations won't have to have the experiences that I had. So in that sense, I'm grateful for my 7th grade year because it helps me help others. But if I could still help others and not have that, I would gladly do that. But yeah, 7th grade year, and then later, and we're not going to touch on this simply because, one, I've already talked for over half an hour. Yay, long-winded videos. And B, it's just essentially more of the same. Going underground, hiding the fact that I'm not getting assignments done. My first year of college. Hiding and feeling shame that I'm not as organized and on top of things as I need to be. Getting so overwhelmed and so far behind that I just stopped going to class because now I have that freedom. I about flunked out of college my first year. And to this day, that's a fear of mine if I were to go back to college, because I've tried more than once and the same thing happens. So, do I still struggle with a lot of this? Absolutely, you're dang right I do. Do I ever allow it to get to the point now where I contemplate ending my own life? No, I don't let myself get to that point. That's for me. Other people, they may need that release of being able to joke, well, I could always do that. I can't even let the thought cross my mind. I've made it a rule, and it's a moral rule for me, which means it's going to be higher than any written rule. My own personal morality won't let me contemplate suicide. And that was a conscious decision on my part to do it that way. And to always look at life as, no matter how overwhelmed or drowned I feel, no matter how bad it feels, no matter how bad it is, there's always hope. There's always, I don't want to go cliche and say a bright side or a silver lining, but there's always find the good. You can always find it. If you look hard enough, you can always find it. Find whatever it is in that moment that makes life worth living. That you can say, well, I need to stay alive because of this. And I am so thankful that I was able to do that. I am so thankful that I didn't ultimately go through with those desires when I was a teenager. Well, so that's that part of the story for me. Once again, not fun to make, not fun to do, not fun to talk about, not fun. And I'm anticipating it wasn't fun for you. I know some of my family is watching this, and I'm sure it wasn't easy for them to hear that a loved one of theirs was dealing with this. Most of them know, at least to some degree, that I did have these struggles. But it certainly can't be difficult hearing that a loved one of yours went through all of that. That being said, next week is going to be a lot more fun. I am bringing back the fun. Yay. I'll be talking more about, what I see as advantages or pluses to, a winning situation with the dyspraxia and the autism, and, how it gives me a unique perspective of the world. Basically, express partly where I get my hope from, and how even having gone through what I've gone through, how I can still be an optimist and still be, generally jolly and jaunty, if you ask my wife. Part of the reason that I wanted to be on camera for the beginning and the end with this is kind of selfish. I got some new hardware that I'm testing out, so I wanted to see how well that worked. But I wanted to put a face with this. I didn't necessarily want to be on camera, for the whole story, for the whole thing, but I did want to kind of bookend, so you see me, that this is my story, and with the beginning, and once again, I'm going to implore anyone who needs help, please seek it. I wanted my face, the earnestness in my face as well as my voice to come across. So once again, if you are dealing with, with depression, thoughts of suicide, or, especially if you've attempted it, one, thankfully, you didn't succeed, but please seek help. No one should have to go through these types of things alone or feeling like they're alone. So whatever life is throwing at you, if you feel that that's where you are, by all means, get help. Yeah. Even if you have to do a Google search for counselors, go for it. Yeah, so that's it. So next week, once again, we'll be talking about the fun parts of my dyspraxia and autism. And I am going to try to get more fun stuff out. There is a video that I'm wanting to do that I'm waiting to hear back from a couple of people who were also involved with the thing that I'm going to be talking about, to see if they'd be okay with me talking about it. So that should be fun if we're able to do it. I'm not going to spoil it yet. I'm not going to give it away yet until I hear back from them. But it should be fun. And yeah, we've got a lot of great things coming up on the channel, some of which I don't even know yet. But stay tuned, come back next time, and I'll see you next time.